So we're going to look at the Mishnah now on the top of Daf Pei Gimel Amid Aleph. And the Mishnah is dealing with Nosar of Pesach, and when you're allowed to burn the Nosar. So the Mishnah says the following: Hatzamos, Vagidim, Vanosar. Now, these three categories are really two categories. The first category, which includes Atzamos and Gidim, are parts of the lamb which we know up front are going to be Nosar. For example, if you have an etzem and the Torah prohibits breaking open the etzem, because it says the etzem lo sijbru bo, you will not be able to get access to the bone marrow, which is edible, and therefore you know up front it's going to be nosar. The same is true for gidim. There's certain gidim that are edible. They are gidim which he will eat because he doesn't want it to become nosar. And then there are other gidim, which are referred to in our Mishnah, which are not edible. And those will definitely become nosar. And then the Mishnah gives you the second category of nosar, which is something where a person was poshea and he didn't eat the basar within the allotted time. Now, in the case of Korban Pesach, nosar means that in the 15th in the morning, with daybreak on the 15th, it becomes nosar. Isar, for the Mishnah says, we have halacha, which was the previous discussion that we had about streifas kodshim tmeim, or kodshim shenifsalu. And in this case, nosar, there's a mitzvah of sreifa, but yisarfu shishasar, we have to wait till the 16th of Nisan. We cannot burn the nosar on the 15th of Nisan. And the Gemara is going to discuss the question of burning kodshim on Yontif, which is prohibited, and why it's prohibited. Al shishasar lios b'Shabbos, if on the other hand, the 15th was on a Friday, which means the 16th, you're not allowed to burn your kodshim, your nosar, is then we postpone it by another day. Sarfu b'shivasar, we will have to wait till the 17th. Lefisha ein dochim, because the mitzvah of streifa of kodshim shenifsalu does not override neither the Shabbos nor Yontif. Amar Av Mari bar Avua Amar Av Yitzchak. Atzamos kodshim sheshimshu nosar. If you have bones of the Korban Pesach and they have a marrow inside, and we've already passed the time allotment for the Achilus Kodshim, and therefore there's a Chalut Shem Nosar, if let's say these Atzamos have some sort of a function, and that's called Mishamshos, like, for example, let's say, I'm not exactly sure the Metzias here, but he could use it as a base moshav, which I don't know exactly how the bones are structured, but he can sort of sit inside a bone and it'll protect him on the outside. Is then mitamim esi yadayim. Now, the law is that nosar itself, by virtue of exeris chachamim, is mitame es hayadayim. We'll have to see why. But the Mishnah is coming to tell me that since these atzamos have the status of nosar, and the reason for that is because there's something edible inside and he can't eat it, then once it's mishamesh also, means it has kind of a shem kli and he can use it, then it's mitame es hayadayim. Now, a little bit of background here. The Gemara later on in this Masechet is going to tell us why they were mitame esei yadayim, why the Rabbanan made this zera of nosar being mitame esei yadayim, and that has to do with shelo yisatzlu hakohanim b'achilas b'sar hakodshim v'yovel lidei nosar. The Rabbanan wanted to create a gzera that would remove the temptation of a Kohen to be lax and negligent about eating the basar and the carbon on time and allowing it to become nosar. So how did they protect that the carbon should not become nosar? They made a gzeir of tumah, and that's called tumas yadayim. And in a sense, it's like a message that was sending to the Kohanim, be careful that this basar that was given to you, let's say in the case of Akas or Osham or even Shlom, that this basar should be eaten on time. If it's not eaten on time, it becomes nosar. It's going to give you a whole tircha, a whole headache. It's going to be mitame yasiyadayim. And now the Mishnah is telling us that included in nosar is atzamos. And therefore the atzamos also likewise would be mitame esiyadayim. And now the Mishnah explains what the status of these atzamos is and why the moach, what we call the marrow inside, is the issue. Says the Mishnah, or I shouldn't say the Mishnah, it's really a statement of Rab Mori in this case. Hoil v'nasa basis lidavra asu. The atzamos themselves, the bone, is secondary to the marrow, which is edible, and therefore became nosar. So we're going to treat, again, this has nothing to do with the laws of muktzah. We have something almost parallel in muktzah called a basis, where a basis takes on the same status as muktzah itself, because it's a basis to muktzah. Here, what we're doing is we're saying that the atzamos have the status of nosar because the etzem is a basis to the nosar, the nosar being the moach. And therefore, because we treat it like nosar, the atzamos are mitame yasiyadayim, just like nosar. So that we have this gzeres chachamim in order to encourage the kohanim to eat the basar and not let it become nosar, that if it does, in event they are negligent, it becomes nosar, it will be mitame esayadayim. And anything that has a shem nosar is included in that gezerah. You would have said that the atzamos, which are certainly not edible, I mean, you may get the marrow, but not the bone itself. You know, you want to get a bone in your throat, then go ahead and eat the bone. That's not. It would not have the status of nosar, and therefore the bone per se would not be mitame yasiyadayim. But the answer is that it is mitame yasiyadayim because it's a basis to nosar. Now, one question I want to ask here is, why is it important that we speak about atzamos sheshimshu, this additional element here, sheshimshu, is the statement of Rabbi just describing reality. You know, it's why would you even deal with these atzamos unless they had some purpose for you? Or is there more of a halachic concept here that the etzem became a, like we said, a base moshav, it became a kli, you designated as such, and that's what your intention to use it as such. And therefore, it's mitame yasiyadayim. So that's something that we have to see as we go along. Name a misayele. Can we bring a ride from our Mishnah to this dinner of Mori? Hatzamos vagidim anotzar yisar fulichishasar. Hani atzamos hechidam. What are the atzamos that the Mishnah is dealing with? That we know already up front, it's going to be nosar. Hechidami ilema delespahu moach. If there's no marrow inside the bone, is lama b'sreifa. Why do you require sreifa? Nashdinu, just throw it out. Put in the rubbish bin. The Torah says that you have to burn nosar, but nosar has to be roy lachila. Here it's not roy lachila. In other words, the atzamos themselves are not edible. As we said before, it's only the moach inside. If this etzem has no moach inside, so why are you burning it? Just throw it in the rubbish. Ela pshita, you have no choice. The isbu moach, that it's royal achil because of the marrow inside, and therefore you're not allowed to throw it out because it has a din of nosar, which requires sreifa. And again, let's add what we said at the outset, that there was never a possibility that you would eat the marrow because you can't break the bone. It's korban pesach. So we know that from the get-go, what's going to happen with these atzomos? They're omdos l'sreifa. There's nothing else that we can do with them, just burn them. Because the moach inside, what we know, that will in the future become nosar. So how does this prove the statement of Rab Mori? Says the Gemara, Iyamit Bishlema, I can understand our Mishnah. If Shimush Nosar Milsahi, that if the Atzamos are serving the moach, and the moach inside of the Atzamos now could have a din of Nosar, do you follow? Because the marrow itself is edible, and therefore it's subject to nosar, and the bones are now being shamesh, or you call it a basis for the marrow, and they also get a din amtulachi by sreifa of nosar. They require sreifa. Now, what's interesting here is that you can even remove the marrow from the bone, correct? And nevertheless, you need to burn the bone. It's ton sreifa. And the reason for that is that the bone itself gets a din of nosar by virtue of the fact that it's a basis. It's mishamish the nosar. Ela iyamrit shimush nosar lav milsahi. If you're going to say that even though the atzamos are protecting the moach, the marrow inside of it, and lav milsi means it's not nosar, is lamalu sreifa. Why does the Mishnah require sreifa of the atzamos? Nas berinu. Why don't we just break the bones? I mean, now it's already past the time of Achilas Pesach, so you can break the bones. Menachalza lemoach didhu, and we'll be able to remove from the bones after we break them the moach that's inside of it, which is the nosar v'nisrafei. We'll burn the marrow, the nosar, v'nashdinu lididhu, and then we can throw out the atzamos. There's no need to take out the bone, the marrow from the bone by breaking it and burning the marrow. If you're telling me now that there's a din of nosar even vis-a-vis the atzamos, then forget about breaking the bone and removing the marrow. Just throw the bone into the fire, so to speak. It's nisrafei v'nashdinu l'didu. In other words, the reason why the Mishnah requires burning the atzamos and not just simply removing the marrow from the atzamos and throwing the atzamos into the trash can is because shimush nosar milsi. That's a new principle. And anything that's serving nosar and protecting nosar, as the atzamos protect the marrow inside, is called nosar, requires sreifa. And that's a proof to Rab Mori. very interesting. We really have two dinim here, and the Gemara is making them interdependent. One din is formulated by a Mishnah that atzamos yisarfu, and the other din is formulated by Rav Mari that atzamos are mitame es hayadayim. And both really can be traced down to one principle, one source. And that is that the atzamos, insofar as they are mishamshe nosar, they get their own status as nosar, the bones on nosar. Hence, we understand, number one, our Mishnah that says the atzamos yisarfu. Why do we have to burn the atzamos? Why not just take out the marrow, burn the marrow, and then throw out the atzamos? No, yisarfu. The Mishnah requires that atzamos yisarfu. And the answer is because the atzamos themselves are nosar. Second nafkamina is being mitame es yadayim. If not for the fact that mishamshe nosar kinosar, and we now attach to the bones the status of nosar, it would not be mitame es yadayim. The Gzeres Chacham was that nosar is mitame es yadayim. So the Gemara rejects it. Amri says the Gemara, forget it. Our Mishnah is not the proof text for Rabbi Yitzchak, or call it Rabbi Mori. The fact that something serves the notzar, that doesn't mean that therefore you have to burn the atzamos because it has a din of nosar. But rather, shimush nosar lav milsa. The reason why you're going to burn the atzamos is not because of the atzamos, but because of the moach that's inside them. A Savar in the Tanav Mishnah holds that when it says in the pasuk, I'll read to you the pasuk, it says, "The etzem lo sijbru bo be carbon kosher." Yeah, feel the pasuk. In other words, when the Torah says the etzem lo sijbru bo in a carbon that's kosher, it applies even to a carbon that's possible. So there's an Isa Shviras etzem on Pesach, even with regard to carbon that's possible achila. When there's moach inside the etzem, then you have to burn the etzem because it's got moach inside of it. And the reason for that is because you cannot break the bone and take out the marrow and burn the marrow. Also, l'shovro, you're not allowed to break it. Kidei lo tzia es hamoach shebetocho. But there's no proof from here that the etzem itself has the status of nosar, and therefore, ipso facto, it would be mitame es yadayim. No, the problem here is that there's v'etzem lo sijbru bo, and if that iser applies even to a carbon pesach that's possible, and it was nifsal mi'achila, then when there's moach inside of it, you have to burn it. But how are you going to burn it? You can't even break the bone to get the marrow out, to extract the bone marrow. So the answer is you're going to have to burn the bone itself. And that's why we're going to burn the bone. Does that have anything to do? Does that in any way prove Rav Mori's statement? I don't think so. Rav Mori is coming up with this whole idea of mitame es yadayim, which the Gemara says is because it's meshamesh the etzem is meshamesh the moach. But now we're saying something else. In our Mishnah, the reason why you have to burn the etzem is not because it's a mashamish, the moach, and therefore gets the status of nosar, but because there's no way I can burn the marrow. Because etzem lo sishbru applies even after carbon is possible.